Imagine waking up on a cold Christmas morning in the heart of Georgia, 180 years ago, expecting a day of quiet tradition and celebration. But instead of the usual greetings, the air was thick with tension, fear, and disbelief. What happened that morning was so shocking, so completely unexpected, that it sent ripples across the entire state. And yet it is a story rarely told, a story that reveals not just an act of rebellion, but a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable human spirit. This was not a tale of ordinary defiance. This was the calculated, bold, and daring action of 23 enslaved people who, in a single morning, changed the course of how freedom, resistance, and hope were understood in their world. Picture it: the sun barely rising, the plantation quiet, yet behind closed doors, an extraordinary plan was unfolding, a plan that would shock their master and leave the wider community speechless. It's hard to imagine the tension, the courage it must have taken to act in such a moment, knowing the stakes were unimaginably high. As you listen to this story, you'll discover details that historians often overlook. You'll learn not just about the act itself, but about the context that made it possible, the subtle ways enslaved people resisted the systems that sought to control every part of their lives. You'll understand why this Christmas morning wasn't just another day, but a symbol of resilience, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of dignity. We will explore the lives of these 23 individuals, their daily struggles, their quiet observations, the way they used knowledge, timing, and unity to create a moment that stunned everyone around them. You'll see how an act carefully planned and executed can ripple far beyond the immediate moment, challenging assumptions and rewriting the narrative of power. This story is about more than history. It is about human courage, the refusal to accept oppression, and the extraordinary impact a small group of determined people can have. By the end of this video, you will not only know what happened that Christmas morning, but also why it mattered so deeply. You will gain insights into how ordinary people, faced with unimaginable challenges, can rise to moments of extraordinary action. You will be reminded that history is shaped not only by the powerful, but also by those who dare to challenge them, even when the odds are stacked against them. So stay with me, because what you are about to hear is more than a story. It is a lesson in courage, strategy, and hope, a story that has been buried in the shadows of time, but deserves to be heard, understood, and remembered. And as we uncover the events of that Christmas morning, you'll see why this shocking act continues to resonate, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can find a way to shine. The moment is here, the story is waiting, and what these 23 enslaved people did that Christmas morning will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about history, power, and the courage it takes to fight for freedom. Before we talk about the shocking act that took place on that Christmas morning, it's important to understand what life was really like for enslaved people in Georgia, and what slavery meant in that state's history. Slavery in Georgia was not just a side detail, it was absolutely central to the economy, society, and everyday life in the antebellum era. Georgia's fertile lands and long growing seasons made it ideal for large plantations, especially after the cotton boom took hold in the early 1800s. Cotton rapidly became king, and its cultivation depended on the forced labor of enslaved Africans and African Americans, whose work in the fields supplied both local wealth and global markets. By 1860, nearly 500,000 people were enslaved in Georgia, making up a huge portion of the population and shaping nearly every part of life in the state. For those who lived in bondage, daily life was defined by hard labor from dawn until dusk. Most enslaved people lived in simple cabins, clustered in areas known as the quarters, far from the grand house of the plantation owner, but close enough to remind them of the world they were not allowed to fully enter. These cabins were often built with basic materials: wood or thick mud walls, dirt floors, and a single fireplace or hearth that provided scant warmth and a place to cook basic meals. Many plantations were self-contained worlds, the owner's house and gardens, the fields stretching out for acres, and the cramped quarters where families tried to maintain some sense of normal life under impossible conditions. Every day, field hands rose before the sun, shouldered their burdens, and worked the land under the watchful eyes of overseers. They picked cotton, tended rice fields, cleared forests, built infrastructure, and performed other grueling tasks that enriched the plantation owners, while stripping them of liberty. The work was unrelenting, and the punishments for perceived disobedience could be harsh and cruel. Enslaved families were often separated by sale or trade, and the legal system offered no protection for their bonds or their bodies. Yet despite this, enslaved people built communities, formed deep family ties, and developed cultural traditions that sustained them through the years. Amid this backdrop of hardship, certain moments stood out as rare breaths of relief. Christmas was one of these. For much of the year, enslaved laborers had no control over their time, their bodies, or the fruits of their labor. But at Christmas, something different happened. Plantation owners often allowed their enslaved workers a short period of respite, sometimes a few days, sometimes a week, between the end of one harvest cycle and the preparation for the next. During this time, work demands were relaxed, and the rhythm of daily labor eased. Enslaved people used these moments to visit family and friends on nearby plantations, to rest, to reflect, and in some cases, to devise plans for freedom or resistance. These holiday moments were a small window into autonomy in a life otherwise dominated by forced work and strict control. For many, Christmas represented not only a brief break from exhausting labor, but also a chance to gather together, share food or stories, and nurture connections that the harsh realities of slavery sought to disrupt. In this context, what happened on that one Christmas morning becomes even more remarkable, a moment born out of a rare period of loosened restrictions, at a time when hope, however limited, could take root in a weary heart. Before we talk about the shocking events that happened on that fateful Christmas morning, we need to understand how enslaved people actually celebrated Christmas in the American South. For those in bondage, Christmas time was unlike anything they experienced during the rest of the year. It offered a rare window of relief from hard labor, and with that came celebration, community, and moments of joy that stood in sharp contrast to the daily grind of plantation life. During the holiday season, many slaveholders relaxed their strict routines and allowed enslaved workers time off, sometimes for several days. This break in the work schedule was one of the few times all year when slaves could gather with family and friends, visit kin on nearby plantations, or simply rest without the constant demands of the fields or the big house. On these holiday days, Christmas became a time of feasting and laughter as people made the most of the food and drink they seldom had during the rest of the year. Plantation owners, in an effort to appear generous or to soothe their own consciences, sometimes provided large open-air banquets for everyone on the estate. These meals were rich and abundant, loaded with roasted chicken, duck, turkey, pigs, and even wild game, along with biscuits, pies, preserves, and other treats that were usually beyond reach. Whiskey, bowls of eggs, and other liquors flowed freely, allowing those who rarely tasted such things to indulge and savor them. Music and dancing played a central role in the festivities. Freed temporarily from their usual tasks, slaves made music with homemade drums, fiddles, pipes, and banjos, and they sang songs that had deep roots in their shared cultural heritage. Some Christmas celebrations went on late into the night as people danced, sang spirituals, and shared stories beneath the stars. These celebrations were not simply entertainment, they were expressions of resilience, community, identity, and shared hope. Even in the midst of hardship, one of the most fascinating traditions tied to this time was the Christmas gift ritual. On Christmas morning, enslaved people could, according to custom, approach any white person they encountered and call out, "Christmas gift." If they were the first to do so, they were traditionally given a small present. Plantation owners would stock up on coins, sweets, ribbons, scarves, tobacco, or other small trinkets to distribute when called upon. Children might receive candy, pennies, or little toys, while adults were given items like clothing, pocket knives, or even simple comforts they rarely enjoyed. Sometimes this practice took on a more playful or daring edge. There are accounts of enslaved people hiding around corners or inside the big house, waiting for the perfect moment to spring out and shout the words, hoping to get the better gifts or simply to delight in the momentary sense of agency. Even though the ritual reinforced the one-sided nature of gift-giving under slavery, it also became a cherished tradition, a brief chance for enslaved people to claim something joyful for themselves and their families. In addition to these customs, Christmas was a time for prayer, spiritual gatherings, and sometimes masked processions or masquerades that echoed African cultural practices brought across the Atlantic. Singing and religious observance mixed with the more secular festivities, making Christmas a complex blend of tradition, faith, and communal expression. For those who lived under slavery, Christmas was more than just a day on the calendar. It was a time when the rhythm of life changed, if only for a moment, a time for food, music, movement, ritual, and togetherness that could lift weary spirits and remind people of the humanity that slavery so often tried to deny. Slave owners understood that the week between Christmas and New Year's often meant reduced oversight, relaxed work demands, and a rare opportunity for enslaved people to gather, reconnect, and plan in ways that weren't usually possible. This status shift, even if temporary, was deeply unsettling to the elite who had built their wealth and identity on absolute control. Northern audiences today might find it surprising that there was fear attached to a holiday most Americans associate with peace and goodwill. But for Southern planters, even short periods of loosened shackles carried the risk of organization, communication, and escape. The fear was not entirely irrational from the perspective of plantation owners. They were well aware of large uprisings in the wider Atlantic world, particularly those that erupted around the Christmas season. For example, in the British Caribbean, the Baptist War, also known as the Christmas Rebellion of 1831-32 in Jamaica, began shortly after Christmas Day. Tens of thousands of enslaved people struck and defied colonial authority, turning what began as labor resistance into an 11-day rebellion that shook the British Empire and helped accelerate the path to emancipation. This anxiety manifested in subtle and overt ways. Some masters shortened the holiday break, fearing that too long a respite would give enslaved people time to conspire. Others hired extra overseers or militia to patrol plantations during these periods. Rumors of insurrection spread quickly, and even without solid evidence, they could lead to heightened vigilance, restrictive curfews, and even preemptive punishments of those suspected of disloyalty. What's most revealing is how deeply embedded these fears were in Southern plantation culture. Plantation diaries, letters, and local reports often mention Christmas with a mixture of relief that the harvest was done, and anxiety about what the break could unleash. These fears reflected the fundamental truth at the heart of slavery. Masters understood, perhaps more than anything else, that their wealth and dominance rested on coerced labor, and that any moment of autonomy for the enslaved carried the potential for challenge or revolt. In this climate of fear and festivity, the story of what happened on one particular Christmas morning takes on a deeper meaning, not just as an isolated act, but as part of a larger pattern of tension between control and resistance during the most unpredictable time of the year. In the quarters, 23 individuals moved with careful precision. Their plans, unspoken to anyone beyond their circle, had been formed in secret over weeks and months, waiting for the rare moment when control was loosened. Every gesture, every glance, every word of the morning carried layers of meaning that outsiders could not perceive. They were fully aware of the risk, yet fully committed to seizing this one chance. The contrast between their silent determination and the oblivious security of the master set the stage for an event that would shock the surrounding community. And so the question arises, what exactly did these 23 enslaved people do on that crisp Christmas morning that made it unforgettable? How did their actions, calculated and daring, challenge the very structure of authority that had dominated their lives? What risk were they willing to take, and what consequences could they face? As we move forward, we will uncover the story of that morning, exploring not just the act itself, but the courage, intelligence, and unity that made it possible, and why it resonated far beyond the boundaries of a single plantation. On that fateful Christmas morning in Georgia, the 23 enslaved individuals executed a plan that would leave an entire community stunned. As the master moved through the house, expecting the usual greetings and obedience, he was met instead with bold defiance. In a coordinated effort, the group confronted him directly, seizing control of the morning in a way that no one on the plantation could have predicted. Some accounts describe them disarming him, others detail how they forced him to submit to their demands. Though exact details are scarce, the audacity of their act is universally noted. What made this moment so remarkable was not just the physical courage involved, but the strategic intelligence behind it. Every move was deliberate, every action calculated, showing a level of planning and unity that defied the assumptions many whites held about the enslaved population. The immediate effect on the master was shock and disbelief. He had long assumed that control and fear were sufficient to maintain order, yet in these few tense minutes, all of that certainty was stripped away. For the local white population who learned of the event, the news spread rapidly, carried on whispers, letters and rumor. It became a story that challenged deeply ingrained beliefs about power, authority, and the nature of those they had enslaved. Suddenly the notion that slaves were docile, compliant and incapable of organized action, was proven dangerously false. Plantation owners and neighbors began to fear that even small pockets of opportunity, like a holiday or moment of relaxed oversight, could be enough for rebellion to ignite. Across the local community, reactions ranged from panic to awe. Some were consumed with fear, imagining what might have happened if the plan had been even larger, or if it had involved more enslaved people. Stories of the morning circulated through nearby plantations and towns, growing with each retelling, each storyteller embellishing the courage and cunning displayed. White families reconsidered how they structured holiday breaks, and some implemented stricter oversight during all festive occasions, fearful that even minor leniency could lead to larger incidents. Conversations in town centers, churches, and homes were dominated by questions about the capabilities of the enslaved population and the fragility of their control. But alongside fear, there was also grudging respect, often unspoken but apparent in the acknowledgement that these 23 individuals had acted with precision, courage, and intelligence. It was a rare recognition that even under extreme oppression, people could still exercise agency, organize collectively, and alter the balance of power, if only briefly. The event also sparked a ripple of anxiety among those invested in the status quo, because it revealed the truth that authority built on fear and violence was never as secure as it appeared. For the enslaved people themselves, this act was a statement of self-determination. It was a demonstration that even in the face of overwhelming risk, they could assert their humanity and challenge the structures designed to suppress them. The story of their Christmas morning became a powerful cautionary tale for the surrounding white population, while also serving as a hidden emblem of courage and hope within the enslaved community. It left an indelible mark on the social fabric of the area, proving that when opportunity and planning aligned, even a small determined group could disrupt the world around them and inspire fear, respect, and reflection across an entire society. What made this particular Christmas morning in Georgia so remarkable was how drastically it departed from the familiar rhythms of holiday life on the plantation. For generations, Christmas had been a time of brief relief for the enslaved, a pause in the endless labor of fields and kitchens, marked by small gifts, music, and gatherings. It was, at least superficially, a moment of tradition that reinforced the social order, rather than challenged it. Yet on this morning, that order was completely upended. What began as a customary day of celebration and temporary freedom transformed into an act of defiance, so bold that it startled the entire local community. This was not simply a minor protest or playful assertion of independence. It was a coordinated, daring action that directly confronted the authority of the master and forced him into a position he could not control. For plantation owners and neighbors, the event shattered a long-held illusion that enslaved people were incapable of organized, purposeful resistance. Word of the morning spread quickly, carried from plantation to plantation through letters, word of mouth, and the growing panic of those who feared similar events on their own lands. It wasn't just the act itself that alarmed them, but the clear demonstration that enslaved people could, if they dared and planned carefully, challenge authority with precision. Even those who had previously regarded Christmas as a harmless holiday, now viewed it as a potential trigger for rebellion, a time when their control might be tested. Anxiety grew, reshaping how slaveholders approached not only Christmas, but any event where oversight might be relaxed, from harvest festivals to informal gatherings. This pervasive fear of rebellion illustrates how deeply the social order relied on the suppression of human agency. The memory of this single Christmas morning became a kind of cautionary tale, influencing behavior far beyond the immediate plantation. Masters became hyper-vigilant, scrutinizing small actions, restricting movement, and questioning the loyalty of even the most trusted individuals. Holiday celebrations were shortened or curtailed, the simple pleasures of food, music, and socialization replaced by oversight and suspicion. In this way, the event exposed the fragility of control that so many plantation owners assumed was unassailable. What is striking, however, is how rarely events like this have been highlighted in historical narratives. Stories of enslaved resistance, particularly those occurring during moments of celebration, have often been omitted, minimized, or sanitized in mainstream accounts. Historians and storytellers tended to focus on major rebellions or legal battles, while the smaller, subtler acts of defiance that occurred on plantations, especially those during times like Christmas, were overlooked. Yet these events reveal a dimension of history that is crucial for understanding the lived experience of slavery, the constant negotiation between oppression and autonomy, the quiet but powerful assertion of human dignity, even under extreme risk. This Christmas morning stands apart because it combined the elements of timing, courage, and planning in a way that ordinary holiday celebrations never did. It forced plantation owners to confront the unsettling reality that the system they controlled was not absolute, that beneath the surface of obedience lay intelligence, unity, and the will to act. The story serves as a reminder that history is often written from the perspective of the powerful, leaving countless acts of resistance unrecorded or forgotten. Yet in this moment, the courage of 23 enslaved people created ripples that cannot be ignored, challenging the very foundation of the society around them, and leaving a mark that resonates far beyond the confines of a single plantation or a single holiday. The daring act of those 23 enslaved people on that Christmas morning was far more than an isolated incident. It was part of a long and complex history of resistance against slavery in the American South. Slavery, while brutal and all-encompassing, was never completely unchallenged. Enslaved people found ways, large and small, to assert their agency and push back against the system that sought to control every aspect of their lives. From subtle acts of defiance, like slowing the pace of work or secretly learning to read, to more overt demonstrations of resistance, such as escape attempts and organized rebellions, the fight for autonomy was constant. Each act, no matter the scale, chipped away at the illusion of total control that slaveholders relied upon. Throughout the South, enslaved people had long sought moments to reclaim freedom, if only temporarily. Escape attempts were common, whether by running to free states, hiding in swamps and forests, or crossing rivers under the cover of night. These journeys required careful planning, courage, and the willingness to risk punishment or death. Famous rebellions, like Nat Turner's revolt in Virginia, or Gabriel's rebellion in 1800, demonstrated the lengths to which enslaved people would go to challenge their oppression. Though the events in Georgia on that Christmas morning were not a large-scale uprising, they shared the same spirit of resistance, a calculated, bold action taken in defiance of systemic injustice. These acts, whether publicized or hidden, were all part of a larger struggle for dignity, freedom, and self-determination. Interestingly, Christmas often provided a unique window of opportunity for such resistance. The holiday, typically associated with relaxation and a temporary easing of the daily work grind, created moments when oversight was reduced and enslaved people had greater mobility. Plantation owners, focused on celebrations, gifts, and feasting, frequently lowered their guard, unintentionally offering a rare chance for planning and action. This environment allowed enslaved individuals to coordinate acts of defiance with less immediate risk of detection. While masters thought they were granting a harmless reprieve, enslaved people could seize the moment to assert power in small symbolic ways, or in some cases through more daring and direct challenges, as on that unforgettable Christmas morning in Georgia. Other examples show that such timing was strategic. Records from plantations in the South reveal instances where slaves used holidays to escape, organize secret meetings, or send messages to allies on neighboring estates. Even smaller-scale acts, like temporarily taking supplies, hiding tools, or gathering in groups without permission, demonstrated resistance that could grow into something more significant. The combination of timing, opportunity, and unity made holidays like Christmas a subtle but potent tool in the fight against slavery. These moments highlight how enslaved people constantly navigated oppression, seeking ways to turn even fleeting freedom into meaningful action. By understanding this, we see the Christmas morning event not as a one-off act of defiance, but as a reflection of a broader pattern of resistance. It reminds us that enslaved people were never passive, that they seized every available opportunity to challenge injustice, and that their courage and intelligence could surface at the most unexpected times. In this light, the story of those 23 individuals becomes a symbol of strategic resistance, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit seeks freedom and refuses to be entirely subdued. After the shocking events of that Christmas morning, the immediate aftermath on the plantation was tense and uncertain. The master, humiliated and shaken by what had occurred, struggled to regain authority over a situation that had spiraled beyond his control. The enslaved people involved returned to their quarters with a mix of relief and caution, fully aware that the consequences of their bold actions could be severe. There is little documentation about exact punishments, but historical patterns suggest that masters would have been quick to assert control, whether through verbal reprimands, physical punishment, or threats of harsher measures. The fear of further resistance or defiance lingered, creating a charged atmosphere in which every movement and word carried heightened significance. The broader community, particularly the white population in Georgia, reacted with a mixture of shock, fear and vigilance. Plantation owners began to reconsider how they managed holidays and temporary breaks for enslaved workers. The event highlighted the inherent risk in granting even brief reprieves, as it demonstrated that enslaved people could act collectively and strategically. Some masters responded by shortening holiday periods, or increasing oversight during these times. Additional patrols, stricter curfews, and more rigid supervision became common, as fear spread that what happened on one plantation could easily happen on another. The incident, while isolated, had a ripple effect across the region, shaping policies and practices surrounding holiday celebrations and reinforcing a culture of suspicion and control. At the same time, among the enslaved population, the story of the Christmas morning act became a quiet but enduring legend. It was retold in whispers, shared in gatherings, and passed along as a reminder of the potential for courage, ingenuity, and solidarity. Even if direct reprisals were meted out, the symbolic impact of the act endured, serving as a source of inspiration and a subtle challenge to the social order. The knowledge that ordinary people could even for a brief moment confront the seemingly invincible authority of their masters, gave others hope and a vision of what might be possible if opportunity and courage aligned. Ultimately, the events of that day prompted a shift in how both masters and enslaved people navigated holidays. For the former, vigilance and control became paramount. For the latter, the story reinforced the value of timing, unity, and strategy. The incident underscored the delicate balance of power on plantations and reminded everyone that even a single act of defiance could reverberate far beyond its immediate context, leaving a lasting mark on the community and on history itself. This Christmas morning in Georgia may have happened centuries ago, but its lessons remain powerful and relevant today. It reminds us that the strength and endurance of the human spirit can shine even in the darkest circumstances. These 23 enslaved individuals showed courage, intelligence, and unity in a world designed to strip them of hope, proving that even in extreme oppression, people can find ways to assert their dignity and agency. Their story challenges us to recognize that history is not only shaped by the powerful, but also by those who refuse to be silenced, who act with bravery against overwhelming odds. By reflecting on this event, we are encouraged to see history from multiple perspectives, not just the voices of the masters, but the lived experiences, struggles, and triumphs of those who resisted. It is a reminder that the past is complex, and that understanding it fully requires empathy, attention, and an openness to the stories often left untold. When we honor these acts of resilience, we keep alive the memory of courage and the lessons it carries for all of us. If this story inspired you or opened your eyes to a perspective of history you hadn't considered, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you help us continue sharing powerful stories like this, keeping history alive and meaningful for everyone.